you talked about what you're doing now shows up X amount of months, years from now. I think you have to have the ability to celebrate those small victories and recognize that every day is going to present a small victory. You have to understand there are small victories that are happening. And what's happening is you're bringing all the losses home with you, and it's deteriorating your home life and deteriorating your work life. I want to be in a room with someone that's, 10 times, 20 times better than me, so I can learn so much from what they're doing and start thinking some of the ways that they're thinking. The people you surround yourself with, you're going to be a sum of those parts.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to do yourself one favor. Make sure to give us a follow and make sure to subscribe. I don't want you to miss out on any of the amazing guests I'm bringing on this year. We haven't missed yet, so let's get right into this one. Quinton, for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity and the pleasure to get to meet you yet, man, tell us your elevator pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
Oh man, thanks for having me on the show. First of all, it's a pleasure to be on your show, John, man. So obviously, man, I've been a banker for 22 years, but launched a podcast about 6 months ago, and it's called What's Your One More with the number one. It's on all available platforms, and really that's kind of our give back to really all of our listeners as far as financial growth advice, leadership growth and advice. And we kind of break up the monotony with financial stuff, but we have some amazing guests. I mean, you were on the show there to kind of bring some knowledge for everyone. We've had the likes of John Gordon, Damon West, Patrick Young. I mean, we've had some really great leaders kind of come in and share some information. Even had Miss America 2017 on there as well. So we've had some really cool, diversified, all walks of life on there giving financial advice as well as leadership and growth. It's been awesome. So that's been a journey of mine over the last 6 months. And we just recently eclipsed top 10% global ranked podcasts and 1.5% in our category in financial investing. So we're super stoked. And that's kind of really been my passion over the last 6 months. Like I said, I am a banker at heart, but this has been something that's been a cool give back to many people. So very excited about that.
Yeah, it's super excited because I'm watching from the sidelines and I've been tuning into tons of your episodes. The biggest ones that really were just the most value packed for me, surprisingly, were the bank crisis stuff that's going on. That's how I've been keeping up to date with it. A lot of the Silicon Valley stuff that's going on. This is gonna drop a while from the time we're actually recording this. But during the time that we're recording this, the Silicon Bank Valley stuff was very recent, and I was pretty much just watching your podcast to stay up to date with what was going on. So I mean, I can attest that you have an amazing show. But take us back in the time machine a little bit, Quinton. Yeah. What was little Quinton like? What was it like growing up? What was the topic of wealth and money like in your household? Take us back.
Man, I love the fact you're asking this because I know we kind of broke off into a sidebar conversation when you were on our show. And we didn't record this, and my producer was so mad. He was like, man, how did we not get this on the mic? But, it's interesting because, I grew up in a household that was filled with a tremendous amount of love, but not necessarily all the financial stability you look for in growing up. Mm-hmm. And matter of fact, my parents went and started their own business when I was about 10 years old. And when 9/11 happened, it crumbled their business and pretty much drained them of everything they own. They put everything into it, not just their heart and soul, but literally, the one thing you should never do in business is put everything into it. They did. And they believed in it that much. And, just unfortunately things happened. And there was a time in my life where, I was at a pivotal age, 8th grade transitioning to 9th grade, about 13, 14 years old, and waking up to your dad going, hey man, we can't afford to buy shoes and clothes and, things of this nature for the new school year. And, it's unfortunate, but we're going to make what we have work. When you're entering high school, you're defined by, a lot of things. One of those happens to be the apparel you wear, and for me at that time, it was a tough pill to swallow. So I decided to make my way over to, at this point, when you had malls, I'd make my way over to the mall and I'd go try to find a way to get a job at American Eagle Clothing, man. I applied at this place 30 days in a row, just to have the door shut in my face. Man, and I remember after the first 2 times I'd walk in there and, the manager's like, yeah, we'll keep your resume, and kind of gave me the old, push him to the side, especially at the age of 14. It was really kind of like, all right, I'm getting there. And then about the 3rd time I went in, as I'm walking out, one of the stations, the kiosk, if you made it in front of the door I'm walking out, had a mirror, and I could see the guy throwing the resume in the trash can. And it kind of was disheartening, but I was like, you know what, screw it, man, I got to get in here, keep going. And it wasn't until around that 30th time I applied, I got a new manager who actually gave me an opportunity and gave me an opportunity to work at American Eagle where, I was able to kind of solve a little bit of my own problem. I was able to get a job, get some income, get clothing at 50% off of everything at that time. And so it really kind of solved a lot of the issues for me that I was kind of being faced at that time in 9th, 10th grade. And it was a tough hill to climb, but it was something that I had to do at that time. And I learned at that moment that, listen, a lot of things are going to feel like they're spiraling and out of your control, but you can always find a way. You can always find a way to kind of take control of that spiral and make it work. And what's funny is, my parents didn't give me the ride to the mall. I actually had to hitch a ride over there to get to my job and do that application. I mean, I hang out in that place for like 6 hours a day until I get a ride back home, but it's just what it was. And it ended up being one of the best decisions of my life. Told me a lot during that time early on in my career.
Man, I love your story. And I actually haven't shared this in the podcast, but I have a similar story. So in middle school for me, man, I had maybe like 4 or 5 pair of Abercrombie shirts and like maybe like 4 pair of skinny jeans.
Yeah.
And that was like my same outfit every single week.
Yeah, it's the rotation.
A lot of our status, right? Our status who, in elementary school, middle school, and high school, especially middle school. I feel like those were some odd years, junior high years.
Yeah.
But it's like for me, it's like I was wearing the same fit every single day almost in 6th grade. It felt like every single day. But I'm very fortunate now looking back because at least I didn't have one shirt and one pair of pants. I had a little bit of a variety, but it still felt like every week was the same thing, the same outfit. And man, I know true. The fast forward a little bit, my first actual quote unquote job was caddying. It was under the table. And I still remember, I think it was my sophomore year. One of my boys, he was caddying since like middle school and he was trying to put all the guys on, but no one else like really followed through with it aside from him. And one day I was like, yeah, let me just come out with you. And so he was my ride there because my grandparents didn't have a car and they were the ones that raised me. So similar to you. And if I had to walk everywhere, find a ride or hitch a ride or catch a ride or make a ride or something, man, but I wasn't getting a ride because my grandparents didn't have a car. And even if they did, they didn't know how to drive. Right. So for me, I went to caddying and I showed up. I did the training or whatever. And then I would show up every Sunday morning and Saturday morning just in case they would call me to go out with one of the groups. And I would never get called out. And that whole sophomore year, I didn't caddy once. I came back, I believe, my junior year. And the first day I came in was that like spring season was like the opening, member guest tournament or whatever. Right. It was like a big event. There was a bunch of people there and all the caddies were there and they didn't have enough caddies. So my first time caddying, I was literally I was 4 caddying for a group of 2. I ended up doing pretty terribly, but it was for a member guest tournament. I didn't have really any experience. The training, quote unquote, was not really any actual training at all. And so they ended up losing, but I think that weekend close to, if I'm not mistaken, I think I made like $700. It was like 18 holes on Friday evening. I think it was like 27 on Saturday and then another 18 on Sunday. And I made close to like $700 that weekend. And from there, I started caddying. But as similar to your story, it then took a couple tries. Took a couple of tries of waking up early, going there to caddy every Saturday, Sunday morning, knowing that I wasn't going to go out there, then going back home or having to catch a ride home or walking home or catch the bus home. Because my friend, he would go out and caddy, but I'm going to sit there for like 5 hours till he get back. Right. And sometimes I just sat it out and waited. And there'll be days I didn't have my charger. So if my phone died, I'll be there screwed. Right. So very similar to your story. But now to fast forward a little bit, I want to ask you, so growing up, you had to figure it out and getting into college. I know you've been banking for quite some time now, but was the financial industry, the financial sector, was that something you were always interested in? When did that interest birth?
Man, I think when you're growing up and you grow up without and you see people around you that have it, you're always trying to figure it out, right? You're always going like, what are they doing that I'm not doing? What are they thinking that I'm not thinking? What do they have I don't have? And, you can kind of like chalk it up to say like, oh, I'm never going to get there. Or, you start looking instead of saying why, like how do I get there? How do I find out what they're doing and how they did that? And so for me, it all seemed to revolve around finances. And it was just something that I was just kind of enamored with. So when I entered college, I was the first person in my dad's side of the family to even, attempt to go to college. And so I always kind of like carried that as like a man, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be that first person in the family. And so when I went to school at the University of Tennessee, when I got there, like I think every person in the 90s when they went to school was pre-med. And you go in there because you got this idea of what it's going to be. And the reality is you realize the path to get through that is not only rigorous, but boy, it's damn near impossible unless you're just a special kind of person. And I got into this and I remember getting in a class where the teacher's like, hey, like there's 300 of you in here, 30 of you are going to make it. And I mean, he was right. I mean, I was in there taking my first exam. I'm like, this is not for me. I'm in the wrong place. So I walked to a college of business and, said, let's get into finance because that's the one thing I understand is math. And, they say it's a universal language for a reason. So I got over there and, I got into it and just, it all started to make sense to me. And I really just kind of engulfed myself into that. And so I graduated with a degree in finance and went right into banking right out of school.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. And just from that, and it's one of those things where a lot of times we have this idea of how it's going to work out. And sometimes it takes life to hit us and wake us up a little bit. Yeah. To realize like, hey, the path we originally had drew up and had planned isn't really how this is going to play out for you. So it's like, fortunately for you, you had the courage to and the wisdom to not only, leave, but leave and move forward into something, the next opportunity. A lot of people get stuck in that gray space where it's like, all right, man, I just quit this one thing and now what on earth I'm going to do? It's like, all right, this is not working out. On to the next thing. I got to figure this out. And same thing with you and figuring out the job when you were young, and it's like this story already that's repeating of, just figuring it out when life throws it at, throws curveballs at you.
Yeah. Someone told me a long time ago, successful people aren't people that don't have problems. They're people that have learned to solve their problems. And, man, I truly do believe that. And, even in college, like, man, I paid my own way. I had to everything was on loans, took everything out on loans. And even switching gears in that freshman year, second semester freshman year, I still finished in 4 because, I just didn't have a choice, man. No one else I didn't have that money to spend. I had to get it out there. So workload, course loads, all that stuff. Even as I got into like the social settings, I took on the jobs that no one else wanted, whether it was Greek life and no one wanted to be the treasurer. I did it because if I was treasurer, I got free housing. I got free dues. So I took on the crap job that no one wanted because it helped fulfill something that I was trying to get. I ended up working for the university during the summer, doing like their websites. And man, I was awful at that, but no one else wanted to do it. And I did it. And it paid for my summer school. So, I mean, there was a lot of different things that I did to kind of find ways to make it happen because, the money just wasn't there. But, thank the Lord above and the opportunities that were available. And I just took on opportunities and jobs that no one else wanted.
Yeah, man, it's one of those things that Jim Rohn says that do not wish for more problems, wish for more skills. He had that little little Jim Rohn voice, but it's exactly right, man. You didn't wish for, you didn't wish for less problems, you wish for more skills, and you figured it out, and you got scrappy, and just like the entrepreneur in its truest sense is just figuring it out, man. So you get into banking right out of college in the finance space. But what was that like? Because I know, at least for real estate and mortgage, from what I know, man, it's a pretty old industry. So me getting into this space, man, at 20 years old, I was like, dang, especially up here in the Northeast, where it's like, it's a lot of old money where I'm from. So it's like, a lot of older people. Yeah. What was it like for you breaking into that space, going into space?
Same thing you're talking about, man. With the youngest dude on the block, and you're entering this space where there's this gap, man. There's this talent gap too, because you got an age gap, you got a talent gap. And so what I found when I got in there was that, that same hustle, that same grind, that same ambition, that desire to do well, you had people that were coasting. And, in my business and in your business, we love people that coast because we're just going to drive right by them, right? It's great to have people that coast because I'm going to drive right by you as fast as I can. So you recognize that immediately. And you're like, man, if I'm looking to do more, but I'm not asking to get paid more, and if I'm looking to do better, but I'm not asking to get paid, you get recognized real quick, like, man, we got something in this person. And so right out of school, I got put into an opportunity to start doing loans. And for me, it was easy, man, because I had no problem talking credit with people. I had no problem talking the good, the bad, the ugly. That was part of my training at American Eagle. When you open up credit cards for people, you're constantly letting people know they're approved. You're constantly letting people know that maybe they weren't approved, but you were doing it in such a way that it became, respectful, but also just easy to talk about. So, I found that I was a people person and not kind of like a person that was a hermit, if you may. So it was easy to do. And I really enjoyed it and enjoyed watching people kind of better themselves through something that I could initiate or that I could facilitate.
Yeah, and to take it like a little deep, little philosophical turn a little bit, you mentioned that we love people that cruise, and of course we do. And now let me ask you, what do you attribute that the feeling, the yearning, I guess, to drive, to step on the gas, like where does that come from, man? Because it's something that personally I have, but I don't have the answer as to why I have it. So it's like, what can you attribute it to in your own words, like that yearning to just drive, man, and to just push and work hard and get after it and not, say excuses and not let your circumstances define you. Like, what caused that in you?
I think it also depends on the phase of life you're in too. Like my drive changes as I've gotten older, with a family and trying to leave a legacy. And that drive is much different than my drive when I was 20 years old. My drive when I was 21 years old was I wanted to be opposite of the situation I grew up in. Like when I grew up without, I'm not saying I wanted to have everything, but I wanted to have some of the things that I felt like I could attain. And the fact that I felt other people took that for granted, that were coasting, it kind of pissed me off more, because I was like, sometimes people don't realize what's given to them. And then, there's those of us that are out there grinding, working, making sacrifices. And sometimes you don't feel like you're moving ahead in life, when the reality is you're chipping away, and you're one chip away from actually just rocket shipping past everyone. And so the desire to just want to better myself, at the time, my wife, who I was dating, was a huge support system, still is, in my life. Without her by my side, man, I wouldn't be half the person I am today. And she was constant encouragement. And she came from a family that had a lot of everything I didn't have, right? Everything I didn't have, she had. But she was also mindful of what I was going through and very supportive of that, and understood what I was trying to accomplish. And, to this day, I owe a lot, if not the majority of all of it, to her, and how she supported me. So just different facets of the life. And I always wanted to do good by her. I always wanted to do good for a future family. And then the ability to see that was within grasp. And I was like, I'm going to go get it. I'm going to do it. Nothing's going to stop me. I'm going to go get it.
Yeah. So let me ask you, man, to follow up on that, because you know it, I know it. This entrepreneur, this, hard working path of just people who want to strive for more, man, it could get very lonely very quickly. It can get very disheartening, man, especially because in our industries, man, it's a lot of delayed results. It's a lot of delayed, rewards, and everything that you're doing in now, it's for things that are not yet seen, right? And that you might not see for quite some time. Like for me, I started my entrepreneurial journey, quote unquote. I dropped out of college. It was February of 2021 I started, and I'm only just now finally to figure out and catch my stride a little bit, almost 2 years later from the time we're recording this, man. So it's like, for you, how important was having that support system around you to keep you going on those days? Because it gets dark really quickly, and especially if we have our business that's not working, and then life hits a personal curveball at us at the same time while all our business stuff isn't going well, man, that could really screw us over mentally, man. So, how important was having that support system while you were pushing through, while you were going, in the trenches getting after it?
Yeah, I can't put a figure on it. I can't tell you how important it is, because it's that important. I often tell people that if your home life's not right, your work life's not going to be right. And so you gotta have that. You gotta have that foundation and stability at home, and you also got to be willing to reciprocate it and be the same way, for other people and those around you. But that's just it right there. It is vitally important. It's the bloodline of your success, because without that, you're not going to get to where you want to be. Because you got to have the ability to come home, and you got to have the ability to digest, the work day and share in that. And I think the other thing here is that, you talked about what you're doing now shows up X amount of months, years from now. I think you have to have the ability to celebrate those small victories and recognize that every day is going to present a small victory. And it's the thing that you might write off and go, man, that's just dumb. But it might be something you haven't done before, and you move forward. And so, I had a mentor tell me, when I was battling one of the toughest real estate markets we had ever been in 7, 8, 9, he said, Quinton, what you got to do is you have to understand there are small victories that are happening. And what's happening is you're bringing all the losses home with you, and it's deteriorating your home life and deteriorating your work life. And he said, what I want you to do is write down when something happens good. And again, it can be so small as in you learned this new thing. It's good. And then by the end of the day, he's like, I want you to have an ESPN top 10 highlight reel. And he's like, when you get in that car, I want that da-da-da, da-da-da. And he's like, boom, you drive home. When you get out the car, you're only talking about the top 10 plays. You don't care about the not so top 10 plays. You're talking about the top 10 plays. And what you'll find is that you're bringing that enthusiasm out, and you're starting to find all the small victories are adding up to something really big around you. And also those around you at home are going to be happier to talk with you because you're more positive about what's going on in your world versus, all the negativity you feel like you're surrounded by.
Yeah, man, I love that illustration, man, that ESPN, because me, myself, growing up, like playing sports, that makes perfect sense, and just marking down all the small wins. And I love that, because gratitude is one of the things I learned and picked up during being in KW. And it's like, gratitude is the highest level of energy. And so if you can practice the gratitude daily, you can then raise yourself into a higher plane. And you start doing that, and you know about the reticular activated system. So it's like, man, you start searching for this stuff, and now your brain is like, just becomes fixating on solely like, what are the things that are like the little victories, the small wins. And now it's like, you become a lot more, what's the word? Gracious, I guess? Yeah. Gratitude. You have more gratitude and all the small wins, because now your brain is actively seeking them. So now you're seeing even more wins than what you were originally seeing. Right. And now it's just a upward spiral. And kind of segue into the next part of the conversation. What's your one more? Like, it's one of those things where you talk about, being innovative. Podcasting, I believe, and I'm pretty sure you believe too now, it's one of the best things that you can do, not only from a marketing and business standpoint, but just from like a giving back standpoint. Because this stuff, it's so more jam-packed, it's so much more valuable, but it's a lot more casual than like a master class would be. And we could have two people just having a deep conversation, and you could be listening right now, tuning in, and just hearing what me and Quinton are talking about. And it's like, it resonates with you on a different level because it's just two people being raw. It's not scripted. It's not, super well put together, all the ums and uhs edited out and stuff like that. It's like two people having a genuine conversation about topics that are genuinely going to impact your life. So, what's your one more? How did that come about? What's your story there?
Man, I love this question. And before I answer that, one of the things I wanted to kind of say about your gratitude comment was it's scientifically proven. John Hopkins has proved that you cannot be happy and mad at the same time. It is impossible to happen. So if you're having your gratitudes and you're happy, you got that smile like you've got on your face right now, it's impossible to be upset about something. So keep that in mind, as you're listening. If you give your gratitudes and you've got that elevated state of mind, it's hard to get pissed off about something around you because you're constantly happy about all the gratitude you're surrounded by. So I always thought that was cool, and that was brought to perspective for me. So to answer your question about one more and what's your one more and how it started, man, this is such a passion project for me because my kids came up with this concept. This was their idea on Father's Day of last year. They essentially said, Dad, we should come up with a brand. And they came up with this brand, and we wrote a business model. We're sitting at dinner on Father's Day, and it was one of those moments you'll remember as a father, one, because I got a 15 and a 16-year-old sitting across the table from me, and they're not on their phones, right? And they're engaged in a conversation with my wife and I, and they are leading the conversation, and they're into it. And they're goofy, but they're having a really good time and being honest about it. And all the stuff that they're throwing out there, they were like, yeah, we should totally do this, and started throwing names out there. And then they come up with the name One More. And then my son comes up with this concept of what's your one more? And the idea behind it was, what's your one more goal? What's your one more thing you're trying to achieve in life? And he was kind of gearing it towards like football and towards a sporting, concept. And so we went on to file trademarks on the brand and file trademarks on the podcast. And, the goal is to have a clothing line, a one more clothing line that comes out and have NIL deals with athletes. We're just waiting on the trademark to be finalized by the United States Trades. But it's coming. We got notice it's coming. And our logo, our brand, and we've already got clothing lines set up for it to drop as soon as that's done. So it's bigger than the podcast. And it's something that I wanted to help build with my kids. I wanted to do something with my wife and my kids and leave that legacy and teach them how to build a business from the top down, and really start working with, how do you get a trademark, working with attorneys, operating agreements, things of that nature, and then give them a platform. So when they go to college, that they work with myself and my team and my wife to where when they sit in that college interview and they're like, tell us something about yourself, they've got a whole business plan they can talk about in podcasting and episodes that they can turn to. We're getting ready to start doing a new podcast episode, Teens in Real Estate. And I'm actually going to bring them on the show and show the audience how uneducated they are about real estate to start with. And then we're going to educate them through the episodes. And then we're going to work on trying to help them buy a home, and have them go through the process as they get out of college. So it'll be a lengthy episode because they got about a year and a half before they enter there. But we're going to work through it with them and try to teach, how to develop and build, a legacy of wealth through real estate.
I mean, that's an amazing story, man. I didn't know that it was your kids that kind of birthed this whole idea. And now
the whole thing, man.
Man, and now you got clothing lines. It's funny too. Yesterday I spoke on a conference, a virtual conference, and a lady hit me up on Instagram, was like, hey, I love your your presentation. I love the shirt because I have a shirt that says "Stop and Stare, just don't touch my hair."
Yeah, I've seen you wear that before.
And so that's my go-to shirt. And she asks if I'm selling those, and I was like, I don't, but I normally when I go to events, I just print out a couple just so I could pass them on to events. But if you want, I could manually put an order in for you. And she's like, yeah, I'll take 2 mediums. And I was like, oh shoot, I might have something going here. I might have to start my own little merchandise brand, use not intermedia stuff. So that's dope. And so let me ask you though, because you have this big picture thing, and it's like, for me being my age, that's something. All I know is big thinking, man. I thought pretty big, but then I got around people that thought bigger than me. So it's like now I'm thinking even bigger, but I just happen to be a hyper optimist. So thinking big, it's comes a little naturally to me, almost to my own detriment. I think I can do too much and sometimes I need a reality check. But it's like this idea of thinking big and starting something that's just beyond like a weekly episode, that's beyond just selling a little course or a product, but that's beyond selling a hat with a logo. Like, how do you start getting into this mindset of just thinking beyond whatever the surface level thing that you're probably selling or trying to give out? Like, how do you think beyond and create something that's just bigger than a little product or service?
So for me, I try to think limitless, like as if like, listen, don't let money hold me back. Don't let the contacts I don't have yet hold me back. And so if I could do something and I knew I wasn't going to fail at it, how would I paint that picture? That's where I start. Like, what would I attempt to do if I knew I couldn't fail? And I start there. And then I start surrounding myself with people that want to be in this pool, this project, and then how can we make the contacts we need to make to get it done? And so I'll start there. And then what's interesting is the people around you also have ideas that are going to be separate from yours, and you can start to build on it, and they will enlighten you into things. You're like, man, I never even thought of that. Like, I never thought of this particular section of the podcast. I never thought about doing it this way. And so you really start mapping it out. And so then I look at when we get into podcasting, right? This is a crowded space. Like, this is nuts how many people podcast, and the barrier of entry is very easy to get into, and a lot of people do it. Now, a lot of people are not successful at it. Most people fail before the first 7 episodes are created. And, and so it's a lonely echo chamber, as you were talking about earlier, But I will say this, as far as the big thinking project on that, I look up to a lot of people, a lot of influencers. I look up to a lot of motivational speakers that I've known over the years. And I look at their brand lines and what they do. And then I started thinking about, okay, like, how can we create a brand line? Because ultimately that's what your podcast is. It's a brand. So what do you do with a brand? You got to have the ability to do a couple of things. You got to have the ability to have great content or some content. You got to have the ability to be consistent with that content. And then you got to build an outward funnel. And that funnel typically starts with social media and then works its way as okay, I got you on social. Now I want to get you from social into my database. How do I do that? So then I got to draw you into my website, and I got to data collect some information so that I don't want to say own the book of business, but I at least have a book of business. And then I've got to work on sponsors. Then I've got to work on ad reads. I got to work on how to monetize this thing to keep it going because, depending on what level you're doing it, you still have production costs. So how do I offset those production costs to where the podcast is not a drain financially? It's actually paying for itself or making a little money. And then once I get to that level, how do I start to sell something that I can monetize when I get on stage, such as what you're doing with your shirt, whether it be a book? There's all kinds of funnels that you have to get into. And it takes time, to your point. What you're doing now is going to show up a year, 2 years from now. But as far as big level thinking, I've been surrounded by some great mentors that have taught me a lot of things. And, I've had the luxury of really kind of taking note to that stuff and understanding it. And I think that's the biggest thing is like, the people you surround yourself with, you're going to be a sum of those parts. And, you can choose to, my dad always said, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And that's a reality, man. It really is. And so I think that I always wanted to find myself surrounded by people that were like 10 times better than me. Like you were talking about playing golf earlier. When I play golf, I want to play with someone that's just phenomenal and makes me feel so inferior when I step out there because my game gets elevated and I take something away from that every single time. Same with business. I want to be in a room with someone that's, 10 times, 20 times better than me so I can learn so much from what they're doing and start thinking some of the ways that they're thinking.
Yeah, no, and I love that you bring that up because like for me, even before I know about like thinking big and, networking and your network is your net worth and stuff like that, all these entrepreneur phrases that we throw out, like even before I knew that, I had in sports, I played sports growing up as well. It's like for me, I always used to play to my competition, for better or for worse. So if I'm going up against guys that are good, I'm elite. But if I'm going up against guys that aren't good, I suck, which is like annoying. It's so annoying. But as you said, man, you surround yourself with people who elevate you and you'll play up to that. But if you surround yourself with people who are kind of almost holding you back and not allowing you to flourish, then you're going to start playing down to that. So it's like who you surround yourself with matters, whether it's a little pickup basketball game or you're actually trying to make a multi-million-dollar business. It all plays out. And a lot of these things that sound like they don't make sense actually have a play in almost all facets of life. And it just how it shows up maybe a little differently depending on what niche or what industry or what you're actually doing. And absolutely. And let me ask you, right? Because you're surrounded by all these big people. We have this 10,000 foot view of everything. And there's so many different things we want to do, all these ideas. For someone like myself, who as I said, it was a very big thinker to begin with and can easily get carried away. Like, how do we bring it back to the ground zero, back to like some tactical stuff? Let's stay in the subject of podcasting, right? Because we're podcasters ourselves. So it's like, how does one take this 10,000 foot view of like building a brand and the clothing line and the podcast deals and the sponsorships and the ad reads and all that stuff, and like bring it down to square one so that we could actually start making progress and not get analysis paralysis?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. For me, that's going to be consistency and content. Yeah, it's just going to be that simple. Like, hey, listen, I know that like before I came on your show today, I was in the studio this morning. So I'm over here in my office. I was in the studio this morning. My co-host is out on vacation. I could have sat down and said, hey, listen, let's dip into the vault and release an episode that we got that's queued up and ready. But there's some things that I was like, nope, I'll do it on my own. I'll address it. I'll go take care of it. And we'll change the camera angles up. We'll put on some different lighting and go. It's just remaining consistent because I know that if I do this today, the marketing company gets it in 24 hours. They're dropping it on Monday. I'm going in on Monday to do another one by myself because that's going to be a Wednesday drop. Just knowing that you treat your podcast as a responsibility and not as a hobby, I think is one of the major things there. And can you set a plan? I love the fact that when I first met you, I took two really, really important things away from my first introduction with you. Well, actually my second. I met you on a Zoom with another gentleman. But the thing I took away from you was your virtual presence was impressive. And it forced me to take a day the next day and go, damn, man, I got to get on my game here. So I immediately got into Calendly, subscribed, and I was like, I got to automate